Thanks, everyone. Again, my name is Rodney Grilli, and some of you might have gone to this session last year, so I will let you know up front. Same title. People always ask, well, why are you doing the same session again? A lot's changed in the last year. A lot has changed. A lot more customers are going all in. We've learned a lot about how we can help them, and so we've tried to bake all those changes into this session. So it's definitely not going to be what you saw last year, even though the title's the same. So my CIO says that we're going all in and migrating to AWS. With a show of hands, how many people are in this situation right now? Wow. Okay. Lots of people. And by the looks of it, lots of people in the room, so good. We get this question all the time. So I'm in professional services, and what I do is help customers first identify what their strategy is, because many times customers will come to us and they'll want to know, hey, we're thinking about going to the cloud, but we're not sure if we want to go or not. And then all of a sudden, the next time we have conversations, from the top down, it's been, my CIO says we're going, we have a deadline, help us. We don't know what to do. We don't know how we're going to do it. We don't have a lot of experience yet. So that's what this session is going to cover. I'm going to go over the journey to AWS first. What we see customers going through. Hopefully you will be able to, as I talk through those stages of adoption, map yourself and your organization to one of those stages. Next, I'm going to go over some migration tools. I'm then going to cover best practices from the field that we continue to learn and evolve. And then I'm going to do a demo. I'm going to spend a lot of time demoing what we do at the customer site. And it's all live. I have nothing recorded. I'm on a MiFi and internal Wi-Fi, so we'll see how that goes. I have some backups, though, if we have to do it. So previously, I've been doing migration presentations here for the last few years. 2 years ago, I covered migration planning, also an agile approach to accelerate mass migrations. Last year, I did my CIO says that we're going all in, and it was really a combination of the other 2 sessions that I did the previous year with a lot of additional lessons learned added to it. The slides are going to be on SlideShare within a week. The video is going to be up too, so you'll definitely be able to get access to all this content after about a month or about a week from now. So I started out with this last year, and I'm going to tell the same story. Mount Everest. How many people have gone to Mount Everest? Anybody? Come on, somebody. No? Okay. How would you like to be standing there looking up at this beautiful mountaintop? It looks great, doesn't it? It just seems like you're standing there. It's not too hard to get to. I should be able to do this. Yes, and everybody knows the stories about Mount Everest and people trying to get there. And many of this, so what I like to tell this story is your CIO just came back. He had an out-of-body experience going to Mount Everest. He came back to you and said, you are my most trusted advisor. The experience I had, I want everybody in our organization to have. I want you to lead them there. I want you to take on this challenge and take everybody up to the top of that mountain. And then you start thinking, wait a minute, I have operations in multiple continents. I have people distributed all over the world. Nobody else has gone there. So how am I going to do this? I have never even done it. I don't even go to the gym, let alone, try to take on Mount Everest. What's the budget? That's a great one. So now you're starting to think, well, maybe that great picture, looking at the beautiful mountain, maybe it's not that easy. Maybe I do need to plan. And now you're under a deadline potentially because he said, oh yeah, and I need that next quarter with limited budget. So this is the Readiness Bazaar, and I have another picture of it later. And it looks really close too, but typically when you're going to at least get to base camp at Mount Everest, which is where most people that go there only get to the base camp, they don't actually go to the summit. It takes weeks to get from the Readiness Bazaar up to even the base camp, so then you can continue on to the summit if you choose to. So this is a lot of logistical work that you have to do. There's a lot of unknowns. And so how are you going to deal with this? And then I told you earlier I was going to talk about stages of adoption. We use this really simple mental model: project, foundation, migration, and optimization. And any one of you here within a minute or two should be able to place yourself into one of those stages. Projects are when customers are coming to us saying, I heard about the cloud, it sounds neat, I have no experience with it, and I don't know if it will actually solve my business challenges. Let's do a little proof of concept. They want to kick the tires and see if it's working. Once you do enough of those projects and you get enough success and you see enough value, then you start to move to a foundation state. Now your IT organization is looking at this as potentially a strategic initiative. And you're starting to think, well, my IT strategy needs to extend to maybe have additional projects next year. You start to think about your operational capabilities and extending them. If you're all on-prem today, you want to go to AWS, you want to go to Azure, wherever, you need to start extending your operational capabilities so you can then support hosting in different locations, hosting on different providers. Then you go to migration. So now your foundation's in place, it's perfect. All is well in the world, and you start migrating your workloads just like you would do any other major IT project or program that you do today. Instead of doing it in your data center and doing the major refactor, you're just doing it somewhere else. There's a lot of similarities, though. And then you're going to go to optimization, because over time you do refactor, you do re-architect, and you want to optimize it for those new technologies that have been coming out. You don't want to just do what you were doing today the same way on another provider. You actually want to start optimizing it. So now let's get back to the story. Your CIO says, I want to go all in, and this is the reality. It's happening all the time now. I have a data center that I need to shut down in 9 months. And I have a capital outlay for new network gear, storage, or compute, and that's ending up in 12 months. And I don't want to pay for any of those. And all your business critical applications are running on them today. And so he's like, our solution is to go to the cloud. And you need to do it, and now you're under a very tight deadline to do that. So instead of being a nice, easy progression from project foundation to migration, you really went from project, maybe, straight into migration. And that's not good. That's not good for you, and it's not good for us. As a cloud services provider and as a professional services organization, we want you to be happy and healthy and secure as you move your workloads. It's not about getting there. It's not about getting to the mountain once. If you could get to the summit once and you just got there yourself, or you just took one workload, that's great and all, but you need to turn this into a capability that you can do time over time, workload over workload, as your staff comes and goes. You need to make this part of your organizational culture and capabilities. So what do? Many, many times we're telling customers to slow down. When they come to us and they say, we have a deadline, we have to meet it, we're pretty fanatical about, fanatical about our customers, and we want to help them, but we also don't want them to do something that's going to hurt themselves. So over time, we've come up with this 3-phase journey. We do an assessment, because you need to understand where you're at. We have a cloud adoption framework, and we want you to understand where you're at today, because if you don't know where you're at today, how do you know what you have to do and change to go to where you're going? So we have a readiness assessment. We do that in a month or less. Then we do readiness and planning. So back to going to Mount Everest, many, many times you want to take yourself and a small core team and you want to go and try to scale the summit yourself. Because how are you going to take everybody else if you don't have that experience? So the first thing to do is get rapid experience doing real things. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's not just about the technology. And many, many times, most people realize and organizations realize it's actually about the people. It's not the organization, it's the individuals. If you want to succeed, every person on your team needs to believe in and have confidence to actually execute and change or transform. Once you get that readiness and planning done, then you can get into whether you're doing a mass migration or you're doing greenfield development for a brand new business venture or organizational mission. And before, this used to take about 18 months to get from the left to the right, because you do it the more traditional way. We want to start small, we want to try a couple things, we then want to figure it out. And what we've done over the last 3+ years now is figure out how we can compress this. So literally, in the first month or less, we are using our cloud adoption framework, business, people, governance, platform, security, and operations. We ask you a series of questions. We have a 6-hour workshop with you, and based on that, we give you red, yellow, green, which is not a score, it's really identifying areas that we need to focus on most during the next phase. So do the readiness assessment. We then get into readiness and planning. We cover 8 work streams, and you can see here there's planning, security and compliance, discovery and analysis. We need to discover what you have today in your own workloads to understand how those workloads could move. You have a disposition. We have a 6-point disposition map that we use to determine, are you just going to lift and shift it or rehost it? Or are you going to do some replatforming? Are you going to try to refactor in the same time you're trying to shut down the data center in 6 to 9 months? Probably not. But we can help guide you through that. Then we have landing zone. Think about the landing zone as your virtual infrastructure. This is all your data centers and everything as software. This is multiple AWS accounts. It's multiple enclaves if you have different types of data requirements for compliance. Then there's the operations. Many times, customers will go through and just drive through with the technologists and the architects and the network engineers are pushing and leading this. That's not the way you transform. That's not the way you adopt the cloud. It is much more important to focus on operations, people, skills, and organization. How are you going to shift your operating model? What kind of skills and competencies does your current staff have? So you can then build learning pathways, because again, what I said was they can't be successful, or you can't be as successful as an organization if you don't have every person on your team having confidence and being successful as individuals. They will make you as an organization successful. Then there's migration process and experience and a business case. So when you start this 4 to 6 months, we look at these 8 work streams. We take 5 applications, and we don't just do proof of concepts. You take them all the way to production. So at the end of, and we just did one last fall, we finished in 3 months. And the customer was like, good enough, we're good. Let's move on to the next phase. But when you take applications into production, you really think about the operations side of it. You really think about who's going to operate and manage and maintain it. You don't do that if it's not in production, right? We're all human. We all have other jobs to do. And so you have to force yourself to take things into production to ensure that the operational capabilities you put in place are ready for prime time, and you're accountable for those production workloads. After that, you have a business case. Well, how many people, show of hands quickly, when the CIO says we're ready to go all in, also says, and I want a 3-year plan or a 1-year plan, and I need to know what the cost is going to be, and I need to know how much staff you have before you get started. Waterfall, right? Okay, so I see a couple hands. Well, guess what? This is where you push back. If you're owning this, if you need to take the whole organization and transform them, you need to push back and say, no, we have a better way of doing this. I'm not going to give you a 1-year or 3-year plan. I'm not going to ask for millions and millions of dollars. What I'm going to ask for is 4 to 6 months, a core team of dedicated staff, and a small enough budget so I can really figure out what it will take for my organization to transform and migrate workloads and operate them securely. Based on that, after you finish 5 applications in those 4 or 5 months, you then have a lot more information that you can then feed into a more detailed business case. And now you can go back. And many, many times you'll see that when you take that approach, although you might get pushback, this is where you need to stand firm and say, I can't give you that information. I have not done it before, and get the experience yourself. So here's the Sherpa Bazaar, or it's really the Sherpa Capital, as they call it. And why I show this picture, because now we're at Migrate and Operate. Remember earlier on in the story, you'd never even been to Nepal, you'd never been to see Mount Everest. By the time you're ready to do your mass migration, you should be fully entrenched with all the tools, with all the experience, and your whole complement of your teams and organization with you. Because this is what it means to be ready operationally to then take on the overall migration. So you don't want to just start off and try to take everybody there. You want to learn, plan, and execute. And you can still do that using agile techniques. So a couple slides here on what it really means to migrate. So when you look at your applications today, you really are looking at, I have some compute or applications, COTS products, maybe my own custom applications running on servers. I need to move those servers. I also have databases. I have my information stored across a number of databases. I need to get those moved over as well. And then I actually have data that's residing, maybe structured data and or unstructured data. I need to move that as well. But I need to move all these things in concert where I can still run them on-prem. I can still leverage this information on-prem with the workloads that didn't migrate. But then at the same time, I need to work and move portions of those to AWS. So the challenges we see here and the way we address those are, it's really about discovering up front what you have. We then look at how we can plan, just like you do in any other major, like I said earlier, if you do a major refactoring of one of your business critical systems or mission critical systems, you have to plan it out well so then you can actually execute the migration of it. There's a number of tools as well that can help you do this. So here on this slide, you can see we have a migration hub. Over time, 4 years ago, we had almost no services up here in this AWS migration services box. We're literally building these services as we have customers go through, run into roadblocks, run into challenges, and when we do it enough times from a professional services perspective or from a solution architecture perspective, we're like, oh, it just makes sense. Let's turn that into a service so we can actually commoditize the migration and transformation process. So we have a discovery service to help on discovery. We have a migration service to help when we're really looking at that lifting and shifting. We have a database migration service and a schema conversion tool, because these are areas that our customers have significant challenges moving. And last year, we announced that VMware is actually going all in, and so now we have a VMware offering on AWS. So if your boss comes to you and says, 6 weeks from now, I need to significantly shut down and decommission resources in a co-location that is leaking. The roofs, we've heard everything. Between, leaky roofs, you're running out of power, you're running out of cooling, all the standard things that I'm sure you all deal with. You can actually do vMotion in VMware, if you're familiar with it, and actually just start moving your guests over. Is it long-term play? It's really good for short-term because, one, you don't have to retrain people, but you can actually achieve things much quicker than people realize that they can do. We also have data transfer services, but what's most important about this slide, when you look at the inventory business case and all these classes of tools, is these are now available in the marketplace. So just like Amazon.com has a marketplace, AWS has a marketplace. How many people, show of hands, have challenges with procurement? How many people does it take longer than an hour to procure software? Oh, okay. How about longer than a month? Yeah, exactly, right? Almost the same number of hands, whether it's a month or an hour. From Marketplace, you can actually procure the tools and the software that you need, but it's part of your AWS bill. So now you're not going out to go through separate procurement and licensing cycles. You can actually do it as part of it. So when we look at companies like Risk Networks or Cloud & Door. Cloud & Door is another one that we use to do lifting and shifting or rehosting applications. You just pay one fixed fee every server you migrate. It gets put onto your bill just like your EC2 charges and your S3 charges, and it's just something else you have to pay for, but it's already, the procurement is baked into it. So I wanted to highlight that, very important. So some of the best practices. Method and governance. Building an ordered backlog of epics and user stories. So remember that 4 to 6 months that I talked about? It's all about you and your organization learning and building confidence and having a safe place to learn as you're moving those first 5 applications. We come in from a professional services, or a partner comes in, or you can choose to do it yourself. But what you do is you take your core team and you focus on these things, and I'll show you some slides here in a minute, by building a backlog, executing weekly, showing demos, showing value that you actually are making progress every single week. Basic methodology, agile-based methodology, and every week you learn something, you then feed that back. So I don't want to migrate 5 apps at once. I want to migrate the first application. And then you find out the 10 worst things that you should have never done when you migrated that first app, and you don't make those same mistakes when you migrate the second app. By the time you get to the 3rd app and the 4th app, you all feel really confident, you have patterns for migration down, and you guys are all starting to get used to the execution. You're building those skills and competencies that I talked about. What about tooling? So there is significant information that you need to make decisions on and evolve. If you go at this and you don't really focus on the documentation and the operational aspects, you're going to have a significant amount of resources deployed in the cloud. You aren't going to know what they do. You aren't going to know how to manage them. You won't understand how to react when you have degraded modes of operation, when things start to fail. Because remember, one of our principles is everything fails all the time, and your systems need to be designed to go into degraded modes of operation and heal themselves. So that's a big difference than trying to ensure nothing ever fails. So you need to document things, you need to publish it, and you need to provide information, because the team that starts on day 1 isn't going to be the same team potentially that's there on day 25 or 10 months in. You need to be able to build a knowledge base as you go along, so as you're onboarding new staff, they have a way of getting up to speed very quickly without going around and interviewing every person for the next 2 months to try to figure what they did. So we don't want to go there. Knowledge base, activity tracking, you want to be able to track it, because if you aren't tracking it, people are just working on things, but you have no visibility, back to Agile, you have no visibility into your velocity as a team. Diagrams, flowcharts. We don't want to have to go out to 20 different programs to try to figure out what a simple diagram looks like as part of my design. Team chat. You need a way of collaborating that's not sitting in a meeting and just talking to each other without capturing that information for long-term understanding and audit. As well as meeting sessions, scheduling, screen sharing, and recording. This one really catches people off guard. When we come in, we say we're going to put everybody in a room. We're going to run sessions. We're going to record every session. So everything you're saying and doing is being recorded. One, people are like, oh no, we can't do that. We aren't going to record it. But when you look at it from a different perspective, the information, how much money are you investing every time you have a group of people sitting in a room? Huge investment. How are you documenting that? Somebody might be taking notes and they might be posting it, but guess what? Technology is really cheap to store video. So when you record that session, you're capturing your decisions, you're capturing who was in there, and anybody that couldn't show up, because we all have lives. You got to take your kid to the doctor, you have to go to an appointment. You can then, when you miss a day, come back and within that same amount of time, catch yourself back up. I did this 2+ years ago. We had, using these tools, I was doing a CSC. CSC was migrating to the cloud. They have lots of case studies out there. And we recorded everything. There was an incident about 6 weeks, or no, 2 months after they finished cutting over and migrating into GovCloud. And we were able to go back and through the activity tracking, we had every activity that was conducted, all the decisions that were made in meetings. We had an audit trail of everything that was done. But now we're not talking audit trail from an application. We're talking an audit trail from you executing a program. That's really hard to do, but it's really actually easy to do now when you put these techniques in place. So session recordings and those are very important. Staffing commitment. Here's the other thing. Most organizations are functionally siloed organizations. You're all working on 15 projects each, and you're all matrixed. So you get 10% of one person's time and 20% of another person's time. And is that difficult? Yeah, it is, right? Is that a big challenge when you can't get people to dedicate their time? So we understand that we can't come in and say, we need all your best people and we need them in the room for the next 4 months and they can't do anything else, because that's not realistic either. So we've come up with a balance. For that 4 to 6 months, we take an approach where we use an immersion-based approach. Give us your staff for 3 days a week, clear their calendars. I didn't say it in the last slide, but we have like no email rules. You don't send me information in an email. We don't check your calendars. We have a block schedule, 2 sessions morning, 2 in the afternoon, lunch and learn. You're right there with your mentors and leaders from us and our partners, or over time, it could be your staff that is doing this. We don't have a long-term project plan. There's no Microsoft project. These blocks are what dictate what we do week over week. And as we're gaining momentum, we can actually put more items in each block. As we're doing those 8 work streams that I showed you, we can actually, each one of these boxes can grow in the amount of work that we get done in one time slot. But then we use this to drive the progress, and week over week, we're reporting back on how much we get done. So, just from a best practices, if the CIO is saying you're going all in, you're already in a good place, hopefully. Typically, between the CIO and the CFO and the COO, you need their buy-in and you need their commitment, because you can't free up those staff if you don't have the right executives. And you might try to push up, and all of us have done that for years, kind of middle-up approach where I'm a VP of infrastructure, VP of shared services. I'm going to try to do this cloud thing myself. It's tough. There's some success, but it's really difficult. You're fighting against the current. You need to get the right buy-in. You need to do those experiments. That 4 to 6 months is all about getting yourself the skills and competencies that you need, so then you feel confident as a small team to then go and do the larger effort. I talked about the prescriptive process, leveraging us and our partners, and really what we're doing is helping build you into that team. And once you finish the 4 to 6 months of readiness and planning, your team now are the experts. We come in, and you will hear this a lot from consulting companies, but we don't really see ourselves as consultants. We always enter with an exit strategy. We want to come in. We don't want to do hands-on keyboard. We want to help you accelerate how quickly you can learn, so we can get out, help another customer, and then your core team will then be used to seed the next set of teams. And this is, you've probably heard of crawling, walking, running. We want to take your core team, that center of excellence, and then take that team and seed the next group of teams, and then you start to run, or you start to walk, and then the more and more you go, now you're starting to institutionalize these practices and capabilities. So that's enough slides. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like. If I switch off here, now we'll see how the demo works. We'll see if I'm still connected. Return to dashboard. Hey, okay. So we have that one, and Hold on one more second. And in that show for now so I can do a mirror so I can actually see what I'm walking you through. Okay. So 4 to 6 months. What we've done over time is, and I said earlier, we try to commoditize the transformation process. And what we find time over time is customers, it's just too much information. They start to stumble. They have no way of tracking it. We're told that the PMOs, we have to follow their approach and their tools and everything else. And we come in and say, those are all very valuable, but we think we can work with your organizations, make some slight changes to it, and hopefully further accelerate what we're doing. So now when I go in here, right now we're using tools like Atlassian's, Confluence, and JIRA. How many people have used Agile tools like that? Okay, good. So you're familiar with it. Here's a case where in about a half an hour, I can load a portal or a space in Confluence. I have 200 plus pages of template-based artifacts. I have knowledge-based articles. I have everything in the template level. I have over 2,000 activities that I can import into JIRA across those 8 work streams. And now I can hit the ground running, not with a blank slate, but what I'm showing you right now is what we use to start off day one with a customer. And it's a portal. We then break the portal into 2 major areas. The first is the knowledge base. Think about the knowledge base as all that curated content that's gone through and it's ready to go. It's ready for operational activities. It's ready for training new staff. It is not half-baked draft documents that you're working on during a project. And many times, for people that have used wikis and other knowledge bases, that's one of the challenges we've seen. Customers try to do it all in one space, and then there's some mixture of what's good and what's not, and what's half-baked and what's complete, and it's not organized. So then it causes trouble, and over time, it becomes less efficient and less usable. So we have a knowledge base, but then down here we have initiatives. And these initiatives are where you're executing your program and project. So I'll show you here, for example, I have one for Readiness and Planning. So if I drill in on that, anybody can go to this Readiness and Planning. They can learn about the Readiness and Planning program. You can see there's no PowerPoints here or anything. Everything's baked in. I'm not presenting. I'm actually using my knowledge base to educate people on context as well as how to execute. And hey, I can see that I have 8 work streams. And down here I have all these CSV or Excel files that have all those backlogs that I want to import into JIRA. And then I have a little video here that walks you through step by step. So now we're generating videos as instructions to teach people. They don't have to go off in different places. You can just go to one portal, find all this information, and start executing. So now if I go back and I look at the knowledge base, I'll talk about a couple of the other components. Implementing ADFS Federation. How many people know what that means? Implementing ADFS Federation. How many people have federated their AWS accounts versus are using separate identities in IAM to grant access and permissions to their AWS accounts, right? It used to take 2 to 3 years of experience as an organization to go from having a bunch of IAM users to actually federating against your corporate identities like Active Directory. We do this in the first week now with customers. We generate brand new accounts, we implement ADFS Federation, and we do that in a way that they never have to deal with all that technical debt of using separate identities that start to sprawl as you add new accounts, and they're impossible to track. And as you can see here, this is in the knowledge base, and earlier I said, well, the knowledge base should be curated and baseline, but I had to put something in here so you could understand what would be in here. This is in template form, 24 pages long. It takes a novice AWS administrator that understands ADFS and Microsoft ADFS, and in 45 minutes, I can guarantee they can consistently implement this time over time. And we actually do this in the first week of a Readiness and Planning engagement. And it doesn't stop there. It actually goes down and has all the sample code, whether you're using Python or you're using PowerShell, so you can do federated command line as well as federated access to the console. Now this is great and all, but actually I don't even, we've evolved this. I've used this with so many customers. We have very consistent success with doing something that's so complex, but you can turn it in and commoditize it to the point by putting it in a run book. This is your operations. You've now commoditized this process so almost anybody can do it. And it has all the references and everything. Here in a minute, I'll show you how we've even evolved that. So now I have run books. But earlier I said you have a lot of decisions to make as well. So what about, how many people have heard, I talked about landing zone. How many people have more than one AWS account? Okay. We start off now with a minimum of 7 AWS accounts, and we have a reason for that. We need to separate things. We need separate enclaves. We need to be able to ensure separation from a compliance perspective as well as from an audit and HR and other, or not HR, but high availability and DR. So if I go in here and I go down to landing zone, and I go into my account design, we already have pre-baked templates that, if it loads again, that have every account. We have naming standards for the email addresses that you use to sign up your account. We have definitions of roles for each account. We have diagrams that are baked in. So this diagram, we're using a simple Draw.io. Draw.io is an open source diagramming tool. The diagram is baked into the page of content. The diagram's version controlled. The page is version controlled. Everything's version controlled. Again, I don't need to leave. I don't need to go open some third-party tools. I can do everything in this. I can see my diagrams embedded with my content, and it's very easy to manage. I have full definitions of what my master billing account is, my consolidated logging account, my shared services account. All these things are documented. We start off day one with this. And now all you're doing is tweaking it. So some organizations need more than 7 accounts. Some have thousands of accounts. Most can stick with 7. This is, I'd like to hit the 80-20. We should be able to come in with baseline templates that are going to get you 80% of the way there, and then we just work with you and just focus on that 20%. There's no value in you rewriting these yourselves. We'd rather just give it to you and you start with this. Now if I go back, I can actually go into even more complex diagrams, for example. And if I go into my VPC and subnet design, again, I can commoditize this. I can have complex designs that you start out with. So when you look to us and our partners for best practices, instead of us telling you what a best practice is and pointing you to a white paper and maybe giving you a demo, we can actually give you an 80% baked wide area network architecture, hybrid architecture with Direct Connect. These things are, you're getting these out of the box and you just need to tweak them. You don't need to start from scratch. Remember when I said it took customers up to 18 months to do a lot of this work? This is how we are compressing this down. This is how we can do this in 3 months with certain organizations, because we're trying to commoditize it and standardize it. And all the subnets, all these other things, these can all be predefined for you. So this is good. A couple other things I want to show you here. Let's expand this out. Implementing DX private VIF, implementing DX public VIF. Many people don't know what that is. That is your hybrid connections. So back in the day, we used to do fiber cross connects from your co-location to your facilities and other things. We have a Direct Connect product that's really single mode fiber cross connects, 1 gig, 10 gig. But you need to implement those, and it gets really complicated when you're trying to implement Direct Connect circuits, make them redundant, and then do private tunneling from your co-locations and your mini locations on your WAN into all those different accounts and VPCs that we were looking at earlier. Again, back to the runbooks. We already have predefined runbooks to start walking you through this and how to do it. Saving you time, ensuring that you're following our best practices, and just really, really accelerating how quickly we can move. I talked earlier about JIRA. So here's an example of one of the spreadsheets that you saw. Really, it's a CSV file. Imported this into JIRA. Within 5 minutes, I have epics and stories. We usually do tasks because we're not writing them as formal, true stories. I have epics and tasks and subtasks. So over here, establishing planning governance tools. Then when I highlight that, I have project tracking, knowledge base. If I highlight that over here, I can drill in. I can assign these to staff. Why is it really important that I use centralized tools like this? Because you're going to have staff, you might have contractors, you might have partners, and you potentially have AWS. All of us need to be working together efficiently. We all have to be part of the same tools, or we're going to start falling back to what I said earlier. You're going to use email, you're going to use other ways of trying to communicate, and then all of a sudden you're going to slow down. When I talked about CSC earlier today, their biggest challenge was they had 90 days left till an SEC deadline. And when we went in, what do you think was their biggest blocker to hitting 90 days? They said, we don't think we're going to make it. It had nothing to do with technology. They had 20 program managers running around trying to track what 100+ staff were doing. And then every 2 days, they were able to start rolling up a new Microsoft project plan. And we were like, okay, yeah, you're not going to make it. That's all we had to see. It only took like a half a day with them to determine that they were actually preventing themselves from being able to accelerate to meet their business needs and their outcome. We went in, did simple things like this, implemented JIRA, tracked all the activities, got rid of the big roll-ups. We started recording sessions because they were literally having 100 people on calls almost all day, every day. And they just were, we had to help them get out of their own way. So that's why this is so important. In here, I can assign activities down to individuals. We can track their status, track their progress, and then week over week, as I showed you, that's how we start modifying and adjusting based on what we learned the previous week. Okay. With that, I did want to jump over and show you one other thing. And many times when I talk about skills and competencies, one of the things that we run into, and if I go in here real fast, is we have administrators. You have Windows administrators, and I said we need to build a learning pathway for them so they can go from doing Windows-based administration to actually doing infrastructure as code. And what does that mean? Earlier I showed you that federation and the command line, so you can do federation from the command line. But if you're a Windows administrator and you don't have software development, a lot of experience, you're going to open up Notepad++ or something else, and you're going to start storing the files on your local file system, and then you're not going to remember which version of it you use, and you're going to overwrite the old version, and all the standard classic issues. So how do we address this? So, as I said, we don't do federation anymore with the CLI. In this case, Cloud9, if you haven't heard of it, is a cloud IDE that we have that we announced at reInvent. And this is what that new developer sees. This is what that new administrator sees. We teach them to start from day one using Git repos. We have code commit, so that's a repository that's version controlled that you can store your code in. And within half a day, we can take somebody that doesn't have any software experience and get them competent in checking in code to Git, using a simple IDE like the Cloud9 you see here, learning how to read and write. Our YAML is the CloudFormation, one of the languages you can use. You can use JSON. JSON's a lot harder to teach people to use. But if I use YAML, I can do inline commenting and everything. It's pretty easy to teach somebody to get up to speed. Down here at the bottom, I have a command line interface with all my AWS tools already installed. When I'm documenting things, just like you do in GitHub, I have my documentation here in Markdown, and then I have a preview over here. So now I'm seeing documents as I'm writing them, I'm seeing what they look like in Markdown, and then I can take these and move them over to Confluence later. So right here, just as this, I can go in here, start typing, and you can see it actually showing up. So what we're doing is teaching them and giving them a safe place to learn how to code, so they will actually implement infrastructure as code, and they'll be able to do that in a way that each person doesn't have to figure out how to do it on their own laptops and their own desktops, and then all of a sudden versions of Python are out of date and other things, and they can't remember what they did because they haven't done it for 2 weeks. They have an IDE sitting in the cloud. You don't use it for 30 minutes, it shuts down, so really you aren't incurring costs, but they have a standard way back to those operations to ensuring that they go through and learn how to do this. So 1 or 2 last things. I'll go back to the slide here real fast. There's so much more I could show you, but what I tried to do is bounce around just so you could see. You, in days, could be up and running. You could have this framework in place, and then you could be focused on actually drilling into the more detailed things of teaching your staff. So if I go to the end, I love showing this slide. Back to Mount Everest. You can take on the challenge, and you can just try to come up with a 3-year migration plan and start throwing bodies at it. And what's going to happen? This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're probably going to fall short. You're going to run into a bunch of things. Or you can focus on those 3 phases that I talked about. Assess, prepare, execute. Learn in a small group, safe environment. Get the right resources to help. And then based on that, you can quickly accelerate. And after 3 or so months, you now have a really solid plan. You have skilled and competent staff that have the experience, so then they can make the overall organization successful. So, thank you very much. Please add to the survey notes. And do we have time for questions still? Yeah. Yeah. 1 or 2 questions? Yeah. Thanks.
My name is Lorenzo Fletcher. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton. We support the Marine Corps and their learning management system deployment. One thing I've not noticed during this summit is application of VoIP migration using Amazon Connect and GovCloud. Is there currently an instance of Amazon Connect as a VoIP solution within GovCloud, and do you have experience moving telecommunications or data centers for VoIP communications?
Okay. So I'll have to, let's follow up right after this. I don't have the answer to Connect. I don't have the roadmap, but we have all the GovCloud team here. And so he was asking about one of our services, Amazon Connect, and for VoIP and for customer service. And so we'll have to follow up with them. Sorry, I don't have the answer now. Other questions? Yeah.
Do you have to start an engagement to get your cool doc?
Okay, so the question was, do you have to start an engagement to get the cool doc? Let's just talk. We're not trying to, it's actually not a doc. It's a zip file of hundreds of documents and everything else and all the backups, but we can definitely work on it. Now, our goal wasn't we don't sell this. This is the way we can actually deliver an engagement in this amount of time with a small number of consultants. So this is our way, and when customers say, we don't want to do that, we want to use our own tools, and we don't want to follow that, we're like, okay, well, we're probably going to have to mark it up 30+% because we can't do it. It's too inefficient. So let's definitely talk. Cool. Anything else? Excellent. Well, I'll be up here if you do have follow-on questions. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the summit.